I'm Roy Potter, a former U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel. Welcome to the Potter Expositor. What is going to follow is some information that I did not include in the last video that I did. I had felt that the video was about as long as it should be as far as my part of it, and I wanted you to be able to have the time to go look at the links that I included in the description box of that video. And of course, the video that I'm talking about is Federal Government Injustice and Corruption. And of course, it also had a lot to do mainly with the Bundy case and how things are transpiring there. So why is that important? Well, the whole land rights issue is very important to our sovereignty. It's also very important to understand that the things that are happening with our country in regards to our land is being manipulated by certain elites, for instance Harry Reid and Clinton, to steal our resources. And when the government will not police itself, when it will not ensure that the people's liberties, rights, etc. are taken care of, then the people have to be willing to stand up. To what extent? Well, that's a personal choice. And we would hope that that will never involve any type of unlawful conduct as far as the government's concerned. But you have to understand that it's getting to the point now where anytime you dissent about what the government's doing, you're considered an enemy agent. You're considered a danger, a domestic terrorist, merely by bringing up the fact that the Constitution is supposed to govern the very government, to be the law that governs the government. And when they refuse to obey that law, they have canceled their charter with the people. So anyway, some of the things that happened at Bundy Ranch and other places around the country. I want to give you some specifics that I didn't cover last time to make sure that we emphasize some of those important points. So again, please, if you have not seen the links in the last video, you really need to go back and look at those. I know I'm really emphasizing that because they're so important in understanding what really happened there, that situation at the wash at the federal corrals there by I-15 that happened on April 12th, which we call the standoff, as opposed to the demonstration elsewhere, didn't happen in a vacuum. That the courts and the DOJ and the FBI are trying to make it sound like that was a single episode, as I've talked about before, and that it all generated right there, and it didn't. Now, I'm not saying everything that happened by some of the people there that was right, of course not, but it went on both sides, and you can see that, and that's the important thing to understand here. Do we just barely submit to a government that can do these tyrannical and diabolical things and then try to get redress of grievance? Well, it hasn't worked, and the people's frustration here is very obvious. Yes, as most of you know, I was there at Bundy Ranch in 2014. My concern going initially was, believe it or not, and you can see these on the videos, to give a spiritual blessing to the people, to pray with them. That's before the main, not the main standoff, but the confrontation with the front loader there as it was coming down off the mountain, when the Bundys wanted to find out if in fact they were using it to bury cattle they had killed or to destroy infrastructure, watering holes, things like that. And the people there were trying to get the sheriff to come out and investigate that, but of course he didn't. So the sheriff really didn't do his duty for his local people there, as far as I'm concerned, having been a prior law enforcement officer, military police officer, things like that. But the treatment of those demonstrators, that would have been, what, April 9th or 10th, something like that, where Ammon Bundy got tased. The BLM brought out the dogs. They were pointing deadly weapons at the people, and also they threw one of the ladies down on the ground for really no reason at all. My understanding is, because I was there as well after all of this occurred, a lot of the people that had been abused by the BLM illegally, criminally, and in violation of use of force regulations and laws went to file charges against the BLM on these things. And interestingly, isn't it funny that when local police are in trouble by using inappropriate amounts of force, the FBI and the DOJ jump on it. But when it's their own federal people, like the BLM officers, none of those things were investigated as far as I know. I don't know of any charges being filed against any of these guys, nothing. And that's just wrong. And, you know, that just shows you why people get upset with this inequality under the law. Just because you're wearing a badge and a gun doesn't allow you to do unlawful things to other people. And so, but that's another issue altogether that we can cover again later. I did it quite a bit on my video series that was there. So yes, I was there to cover it, to find out what was going on, to make sure that this stuff became public. And also I was honestly concerned that they would do a Waco-style destruction on the Bundy's ranch house or dwellings. There had been some threats along those lines. I did not hear them myself. Actually, I heard Dan P. Love say quite the opposite, that they weren't planning on doing that. But the government lies, especially when they have something to cover up. And there's a lot to cover up on this Bundy thing, which I'm not going to get into right here. But I do want to talk about some of the events that occurred. Okay, so that was that whole thing with Ammon getting tased that first day over just trying to get the sheriff out there to investigate, and the BLM bringing out dogs in a totally incorrect situation as far as I was a member of a garden plot mission in the U.S. military, and the idea of that is for civil disturbance operations, and what I saw there was totally inappropriate, but we'll talk about that at some other time. But when that occurred then, at that point, you know, a lot of people started showing up to show their support for the Bundys, and we're at the demonstration area. There were no confrontations with the BLM. They had no intentions of doing that, but they were still concerned that there could be some type of a problem at the ranch itself. So it went on for a few days, and then finally on the 12th, I believe it was the 12th, I looked out. We came back in from Las Vegas. We drove back out. And I noticed that there was an observation post up on what's called Mormon Mesa. It hadn't been there before. This is very early in the morning, probably about 0700 hours. Very odd, considering the circumstances. So we went down there. The people gathered again to hear the different speakers, and then the sheriff shows up, Sheriff Gillespie. And his announcement is that the BLM has agreed to leave, that they're going to release the cattle, that they're not going to be involved anymore. Okay, so this is still in the demonstration area at the stage on the public highway going into Bunkerville. It's nowhere near the federal corrals. It's several miles away, as a matter of fact. So we found out later some things about what Gillespie had been going through. But at any rate, the point is when I knew he was going to speak, boy, I got up in the hills and I was looking around because I was scared to death that somebody, you know, either a provocateur from the federal government, like that has never happened before, shoot the sheriff, or possibly, you know, a criminal of some sort that might do that. So I was up watching for that to make sure that that didn't happen, and thank God it didn't. A lot of other things occurred, but at any rate, the point is that the sheriff was the one who said that the BLM was leaving and that the cattle were going to be released. So apparently Bundy had already sent some cowboys over to the corrals as the cattle were going to be released. And there's some links down below. I know it takes time to go through these, but I really think that you should. They're not court documents. They're summaries of what happened during the court testimony and some of the things that the defense uncovered. It's not extensive or exhaustive by any means, but I'd like you to read it. One is from the Guerrilla Media Network. The other is another video about the abuses that the BLM conducted while they were there against American citizens. The types of things you'd see the American soldiers doing in Iraq. Still improper even there under the circumstances, but at any rate, those types of military tactics on them. And also a video that myself and Brandon Thornton did on April 13th of 2014, when after I did an analysis of what had occurred, I finally realized that that whole thing on the 12th was a setup to actually cause a mass casualty situation. And again, I won't go into that in a lot of detail, but other evidence came out later to show that that was in fact the case. And, you know, people should be held accountable for that in the BLM, in the federal government, and in the sheriff's office. There were a lot of people, not a lot, there were a few that came with firearms, long guns, pistols, handguns, things like that. But this demonstration area, not at the corrals, not underneath I-15, but the demonstration area in Bunkerville, or on the road into Bunkerville, on that state land there, there were people that had weapons. It's an open carry state. They were exercising their First Amendment and Second Amendment rights, and they had a lot of speakers coming there, politicians, law enforcement officers, all sorts of people to talk about the dispute over the way the federal government was controlling the land, whether legally or illegally or inappropriate or unconstitutionally. That's what all that was supposed to settle. But at any rate, the point is that it was a peaceful demonstration. Weapons alone aren't the issue, not there at the demonstration area, okay? And it was a good thing. As I kind of pointed out already, you never know when you're going to have violent or criminal people show up to a situation like that, and if nobody there is able to defend themselves against real criminals, provocateurs even, then, you know, that would be just stupidity. So there were a lot of reasons for a lot of good people there to have their weapons. But again, it was a peaceful demonstration, and anytime anybody acted violently or talked violently, they were told to leave, and that's very important. Now, when they go over to when Gillespie said that they were releasing the cattle and the BLM was leaving, Bundy waited, I think it was about 2 hours, and he had sent his cowboys over there to get the cattle. They called him back and said, well, they're not releasing it. And from here on, it gets kind of complicated, mainly because there's a cover-up going on at the federal government level. Not just the FBI and the DOJ and the BLM, but also in the court system itself. And I can speak volumes to that. But at any rate, what you're going to look at from that point on is the people believing that the release of the cattle is imminent, and so they go over there to take part in that. And what they meet when they go over there, and I have to depend on videos for this, but and people's cell phones and other things. What you hear them in the background saying, the BLM, is that they're going to shoot these people. Even the reporter Michael Lynch, okay, and I understand they also threatened to shoot David Knight. So reporters who were carrying, you know, recording equipment, and there were a lot of women and children. Should they have been there? Maybe not. But the point is, this was a peaceful demonstration. There were apparently some people with weapons that approached the corrals. That's still state land. Is there a real crime involved here? Well, that's one of the problems with this whole court case. It's obvious that the federal government, the courts included, the court wasn't being a referee here. They were stacking the deck towards the government, and kept a lot of information away from the jurors about what had transpired. This didn't happen in a vacuum at the corrals off of I-15. This wasn't, you know, an incident all by itself. This was caused by a lot of things that had happened over a period of time, specifically in the last week at that point in time, but actually for several months and years. And the jurors were not permitted to hear most of that. As a matter of fact, the court denied a lot of witnesses on the defense side, which they used some very spurious, in my estimation, reasons for not allowing them to do that. But the court tried to isolate this as a single criminal episode at the corrals. First of all, that really surprises me, because in any kind of a criminal investigation, you show what leads up to somebody committing what you consider to be a criminal act. And they didn't do that at all here, which would have cast a whole different light on the people that were there. So at any rate, I wanted to give you that information. Please look at the information in the description box, and be aware that, as I've been trying to get to President Trump and to Sessions and all these other people, we have problems with these government agencies here in our land. We shouldn't be doing these military adventurisms overseas. Okay, that's wrong. I mean, the self-defense, that's one thing. But we have people here abusing our American people, and it needs to come to an end. Thanks for listening.